We were asked this year by WTM Africa to produce a report on responsible tourism across the African continent. I want to talk about that now, but also to talk about the impact that Africa has had on the development of responsible tourism in India, which has been significant and a good example of the value of people sharing expertise across countries and across continents, because what it does is to accelerate development of responsible tourism in those places, learning from places which have already successfully established the practices. You can get a physical copy of the report, I'm sure, probably from this venue, but obviously you can download one and print it off the web as well. Just to explain what we're about now in the ICRT Global, we're really about sharing best practice and encouraging people to copy others. You can never exactly copy, you can be inspired by others, but you always have to craft a response that works in the particular place that you're working. We do that through training and education, through the ICRT networks, and we have now groups of people working together in an informal and loose way in networks throughout Europe, Africa and Asia. We've got a new group just starting in Latin America, and we hope to have something in the Caribbean soon. We run conferences and events and work with others in doing that. And obviously you'll be going very shortly to hear this year's Responsible Tourism Awards from Africa. We now have them in 6 different regions. And obviously one of the main reasons we do the awards is to share examples of inspiring good practice, to encourage others to follow in the footsteps of what others have done in order to accelerate the development of responsible tourism around the world. And that's really what the ICRT Global is about. You may have seen this slide before, but the point I want to make with it is that really responsible tourism originated in terms of the modern movement in 2002 in the Cape Town Conference on Responsible Tourism in Destinations, which was held here in Cape Town as a side event to the WSSD being held in Johannesburg that year. That resulted in the Declaration on Responsible Tourism in Destinations, which is really the founding document of the current responsible tourism movement. And that work in Cape Town, Southern Africa, was really first sparked by the post-apartheid white paper on the development and promotion of tourism in South Africa from 1996, and work I'd been doing with the Association of Independent Tour Operators in the UK, which gave us both outbound operators and a destination committed to the principles of responsible tourism, and building on the work of Jost Kruppendorff from his book on the holidaymakers in 1987. The movement has moved on. In 2022, there's a new charter on responsible tourism signed on Magna Carta Island, which really reflected on 2 decades of work on responsible tourism and shortened the document to effectively now the charter is one side of A4, which does mean it's not replaced the original Cape Town Declaration, but it is a briefer statement of the principles of responsible tourism. So you can get a copy of this report on responsible tourism across Africa. I'd encourage you to do so, and you can see from that South Africa has really led with 94 businesses and destinations being recognised, and 8 overall or global winners in that period. Kenya 23 recognised, Mozambique 10, Namibia 10, Tanzania 10, Botswana 9. You can see the dominance here of East and Southern Africa, but the Gambia has also had 8 recognitions, Uganda 7, and so on. It's our ambition, however, to spread the responsible tourism awards much more evenly across Africa. If you're able to assist us in any way by securing more entries from underrepresented regions and countries, we'd be very pleased to take your advice on how to do that. So if we look in detail, you can now look at a website app that we've developed where you can look at previous winners of Responsible Tourism Awards. It's available on the ICRT Global website, and there you can search by by the category, by country, or by the name of the company, and the full citations are there. We hope that people will use that for collateral marketing to demonstrate to their potential clients what they've done and why they've been recognised in the Responsible Tourism Awards. After the Cape Town Declaration in 2002, the next event didn't really take place in terms of these international conferences for 6 years. It was in 2008 in Kerala that I was invited to bring representatives from responsible tourism around the world to a conference in Cochin in Kerala. And the purpose of that was really to share their experience and their expertise to take forward the responsible tourism agenda across the world, but most particularly, of course, in India. There are over 500 Indian and foreign delegates at that conference, with 61 speakers from over 29 countries. And the important thing about that destination conference was it supported Kerala in developing a responsible tourism strategy, which eventually became its equivalent of the national strategy at state level. The guy up in the right there is Rupesh Kumar, who's really led these initiatives since his successful experiment in Kumarakom between 2008 and 2010. And essentially there were three elements to what Rupesh developed. The first, producer groups of essentially subsistence farmers coming together to produce particularly fruit and vegetables, but also sometimes fish and meat and craft products into the hotels, able to produce at scale sufficient to meet their needs. Village life experiences, which are based on the notion of a township tour, come back to that. Again, that from South Africa or Southern Africa. And also fundamental principle of avoiding dependency on tourism by developing essentially what were additional livelihood opportunities at the household level. In 2004, the Gambia is Good started business, really based around the problem of farmers were unable to earn decent livings in the Gambia, and that yet a thriving tourism industry was depending almost exclusively on imported produce, and that just didn't make sense. So this was a targeted initiative funded by the UK, but with support from Haygrove, a major market gardening company in the UK, to enable small producers in the Gambia to produce fruit and vegetables to a quality and at a scale which would replace some of the imported goods. This is the reflection in 2013, looking back at the Gambia is Good work, the guiding principles of that, which have been applied so successfully in the Gambia and which really made a big difference to local communities in the villages of Kerala, where tourism had begun to be seen as a problem, suddenly begins to be seen as an asset. So GIG was improving the lives for farmers by enabling them to move from subsistence farming to commercial farming, and that reduced imports, which was also good for the Gambian economy. So that's the first thing, borrowed from Africa, adapted for use in Kerala, and still going very strongly there now. Then township tours. We're all familiar with those in the context of Southern Africa, where mainly it's about visiting and purchasing or giving, and sometimes giving philanthropy. The Tando example there on the top right is an example which is philanthropy based. Village life experiences, though, took that idea, turned it into something different. It gave tourists the opportunity to share an experience with often an agricultural worker in a village in Kerala. So the guy on the right there is up a palm tree collecting palm juice to make toddy. The people there are all working with local people to have an experience for half an hour or an hour, and the villagers get paid for each of the interactions that they have with guests. And those packages, those village life experiences, are commissionable to tour operators and resorts. So they work well in the travel and tourism industry. These village life experiences, producer groups, village life experiences, and avoiding dependency, were principles adopted really from the African experience. And it went from a laboratory experiment in Kamakura to a program because we were asked by the Minister of Tourism at the time in Kerala to look at the attitude now of households to tourism. And from having really hated tourism prior to this initiative, suddenly there's massive approval of tourism. You can see only 3 households reported that tourism was bad, and these were where they had members involved in tourism, and only 4 where they didn't have people engaged with tourism. The community benefit was recognised, so that this experiment turned into a programme for the state. And to achieve that at the state level, they created the Responsible Tourism Mission, which has been led by Rupesh Kumar. And its aims are simple: to make tourism a tool for the development of village and local communities, eradicating poverty and giving emphasis to women's empowerment. Worked very strongly at that over the last 10 years. The mission aspires to provide an additional income and a better livelihood to farmers, traditional artisans and marginalised people, along with creating a social and environmental equilibrium. Looking back on it now, the work we did in Kerala was one of the early examples of work done to mitigate the worst effects of over-tourism. Responsible tourism has subsequently spread across Africa. Glyn, who's in the audience, is in a good position to talk about the experience of visiting Kerala. I'm sure if he's asked, he'd be very happy to do that. But it has been a remarkably productive engagement for India. The sadness is that we've not been able to invite anyone from India back to Southern Africa or Africa to experience the product on the ground and to learn and be inspired by it. Thank you for listening. As ever, it's a great pleasure to speak at WTM Africa. Thank you.